Let me just, a couple of more things about lenders. Once again, about forms. Okay, so far I've told you 4 forms, right? The residential listing coronavirus addendum, which I hope your sellers will sign as an amendment to the listing. The PEAD form, the entry, the previewing and entry advisory and declaration, which I think you should all people who enter the property sign it. I mentioned the CVA, the coronavirus addendum, that is a good idea for buyers and sellers to agree to. And then the NUCC, the notice of unforeseen coronavirus circumstance, that goes along with the CVA. That's the form you give to the other side to say, well, I need to delay. So the 2 other forms we came out are related to what we've been talking about rentals. First of all, there's a form called the NTAP, Notice of Ability to Pay Rent. Well, we're going to have to tweak this form based on what just happened that John mentioned about this judicial council eviction moratorium. Because when we first came out with that form a couple days ago, it basically was saying, this is the form for the landlord to give the tenant, telling them that, yeah, there's an eviction moratorium, but you need to tell me in writing if you're not planning on paying your rent, and you need to tell me the reason. Because remember, up until this big statewide thing, the existing eviction moratorium said you could not pay your rent. You have to notify the landlord why you're not paying the rent. It's got to be related to COVID-19. Well, that's no longer true. Under this new statewide eviction freeze, you don't even have to tell the landlord why you're not paying the rent. Remember, you do have to pay it back. You have to pay, you might as well pay, but nevertheless. So we're going to tweak that form. We still think it's a good idea that you have a form that you can give to your tenants, sort of explaining what's going on here. And hopefully it'll be updated today or tomorrow. This is not required. You're not required to tell your tenants what's going on, but it may help the whole situation. It helps to remind them they still got to pay the rent. It's not because some of them are probably going to hear, oh, great, I don't have to pay rent. No, you just can't be evicted for not paying it, but that doesn't mean you don't have to pay your rent. And then so that form, NTAP, I'm sure will be tweaked. Now there's a second form just came out, which will probably also have to be tweaked slightly based on what just happened, called the RPD, Rent Payment Delay and Repayment. The idea is this: if you want to, you can set up a repayment plan with your tenant. You don't have to. I mean, they owe you all the money. And once the eviction freeze is over, you can evict them immediately. But maybe some tenants are seriously having problems and you want to work with them, and it's better to get something rather than nothing. So you can agree with them, okay, well, you lost your job because of COVID-19. How about you pay me half the rent? Or maybe, why don't we agree right now that once this is over, you'll pay the back rent back over 3 months or 4 months or 2 months or 6 months or whatever you got to do. I mean, this is not required, obviously, but this is a form you can use if you want. The RPD, just like the other form, is a notice to the tenant. Both of these will come on. I think they're going to be on zip form today or tomorrow. They're being tweaked right now to take into account what just happened. So these forms aren't mandatory, but they're just sort of helpful to you as a landlord to notify the tenant what's going on and to set up any type of repayment. Or you don't have to do it now, you can wait till later. And I'm sure we'll have more forms issues as well. So that's the 6 forms, and these last 2 haven't even been officially hit zip form yet. Those are the 6 form changes that have happened so far because of the coronavirus situation. And that's the latest on the best practices. You're an essential service. Be glad you're not in the city of LA, no showings at all. That hasn't been anywhere else in Southern California yet. That is also the case in some places in Northern California. So that's sort of the important stuff I wanted to cover. And I can, of course, take questions. I haven't been looking. Are there more questions?
Oh, we have many questions waiting for you.
Okay.
So first of all, on the two forms, the PEAD form and the RPA CLA form, can those still be used in the city of LA? Is there any reason why they wouldn't be able to?
Well, you can use them, except there are no showings. So you don't really need a form for people to sign to enter the property if they're not allowed to enter the property.
So
City of LA. So you're not supposed to be going into the property, period. So,
I
I
know
mean,
that
yeah.
agents have been trying to find ways to have their clients enter the property on their own. What would you say to those agents?
Yeah, that's a good question. What if the agent's not involved at all? Is there anything wrong with a buyer just entering the property? The seller lets them in, let's say. Well, I don't know how strictly this is going to be enforced. If the agent is arranging that, to me, that's a showing. Just because the agent's not there doesn't mean it's not a showing if you arranged it. What if there's no agent involvement at all? Buyers contact seller directly and to arrange to coming in. I think if you ask the legal authorities in the city of LA, they'd say that's against the spirit of this rule. We're saying right now, don't go into people's properties. That's one thing you don't need to do. Of course, what buyers and sellers do between themselves without realtor involvement, they're going to do what they're going to do. But if I were talking to them, I'd say, I think that would go against the whole spirit of this. By the way, a general question, Julie, I think you asked me to talk about before is, what if, forget LA City for a second, you're in LA County where real estate is still going on. That means no open houses, though. No open houses, no broker previews, no broker tours. So what do you do if you see a realtor violating this? They're holding open houses, or they're having multiple showings. They're allowing more than 2 people in at a time. They're clearly not following the best practices. What do you do about that? Should I file a complaint at the Board of Realtors? Is that a violation of the Code of Ethics? Well, believe it or not, NAR has said that's not specifically a violation of the Code of Ethics. What that is a violation of the law. First of all, those realtors are totally setting themselves up for liability, no E&O. And in some places in California, local law enforcement will actually get involved and will go shut down the open house and cite the people and fine them. So one avenue you have is local law enforcement. Unfortunately, it's case by case, but generally you can't use the Code of Ethics, unfortunately. It's not considered an ethical violation. We can argue about that, but that's what NAR just sort of came out with. I mean, to me, violating any law is ultimately, you could say, is unethical, but that's me talking, that's not NAR talking, and you guys enforce it yourself. But I always say, but basically this is a local issue. Local associations can talk about internally, how are we going to go after these people? You could do anything from calling them out, publicly shaming them, calling law enforcement, do whatever you want. It's a local issue. You guys police yourself. C.A.R. doesn't police anybody. Local associations police each other and police your own members. You guys collectively do that. So you guys can do what you got to do. But I did want to raise that Code of Ethics issue because you asked me that up front. Okay, go ahead.
So right now, if the city of LA is not allowing any showings, does that also affect virtual tours? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good, do everything you can virtually. I mean, there's no problem with a seller who has the equipment, taking pictures, creating videos, and you set it up so the buyer can view those videos. And if that's okay with the buyer, if that can work. Deals are closing right now in areas where there's no in-person showings. How does a realtor do a visual inspection? Well, you really can't do a visual inspection in city of LA. You can do them other places. But you can basically, we're even saying you can, as a listing agent, you can base your AVID form, basically say to the buyer, I'm not allowed to enter the property, but the seller sent me these pictures, and based on these pictures, this is what I'm telling you, and you understand that I didn't physically enter the property. I did the best I can, and this is what I have to say to you. And we actually have language on our website. You all got an email about a week ago called something called legal tools, or go to the website and you can find out language we suggest that you can actually put on your AVID form if you were unable to actually enter the property. Remember, that should only be an issue in LA City. LA County, you can go in and do your inspection. On the other hand, I've heard realtors say, well, even if I'm allowed to, I'm uncomfortable going into the I want to do everything virtually. I don't want to do it. Can I still do it? Yeah, you can still base your AVID form on things you've gotten from the seller or whatever. And if the buyer agrees to that and they sign acknowledging that, you can do that. That's perfectly legal. So that's an issue that's also been coming up.